Hi, my name is Debs Harris, and last year I was able to attend an event called Passion, Purpose and Potency, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my experience and some things that I learnt while I was at this event. It was billed as an opportunity to be better equipped as leaders in a changing world that we find ourselves in. I think all of us would agree that with technology and globalization and this movement and that movement, the world we're in today is quite different to what it was 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. How can we be effective in how we lead in the times that we live in? So the event was helping us to look at leadership and followership and the dynamics in between. It was challenging us to look for resources that maybe we haven't identified and tapped previously. So that was the billing. I was intrigued and I signed up and went along. And it was an event like none I've been on previously. It was not a workshop or a training event. It wasn't really a conference. I came back wondering how to explain it to my colleagues back here in Singapore, and I said it was an experience. It was like being in a laboratory of human dynamics, a chance to look at my own behaviour and how I operated in a certain environment, and look at the behaviour of all the people who were around me. There were about 35 of us, from all different walks of life, from different countries, from different continents, who'd come together to learn together. It was just overall quite an experience. So we had gathered to around a certain purpose, which was clearly specified in the brochure, but I think many of us realised we hadn't read it very carefully when we signed up. We had a very specific task to do in the 7 days we were together, and that was to set up and create together an organisation in which we could explore the dynamics of leaders and followers, of looking at how we behave and how we can maybe identify some of these untapped resources to begin to capitalise on them. And in the first couple of days, there was a very open sense. There was complete freedom. It was a very organic environment to be and work in. The director of the event had restated the purpose of the event to us, reminded us of why we were there, and said, so, how shall we begin? Who would like to start? And we took it from there, really. And it was an interesting 2 days at the beginning, because there was such freedom, and I discovered new things about myself, how I operate when there are it almost felt like there were no parameters. I mean, there were parameters. As I listened to some of the other participants talking, I realised I needed to gauge my sense of freedom and all the things I wanted to do and explore, given that freedom, against the parameter of, am I contributing to the purpose of the event? Is what I'm putting my energy into, and my contributions, which were mostly verbal at that time, are they helping us move towards creating this organisation and learning the things that we've all said that we want to learn together? But nonetheless, it was a time when I felt like I was pushing back some boundaries that I'd perhaps put in place before, and exploring new ways of working. I discovered that I could be very creative. I had a very fertile imagination and lots of ideas flowing during those first 2 days. And yet, despite that freedom and that great sense that I had, it was also a deeply frustrating 2 days, because we, as a group, and you have to understand, we hadn't met each other before, by and large, and so we just arrived and thrown into this task. We hadn't evolved sufficiently to have a way of making decisions. and so that all these ideas were coming out, and we struggled with the idea of, well, should we have consensus, or should we appoint a leader? And there would be ideas that many people would think that's really great, and then there would be one or two voices of dissent or resistance, as we started to call it. And it was interesting how that immobilized us as a group. We found it very difficult to move forward. And we all had this collective yearning for structure and authority and management. And on about the third day, our wish was granted, and the management structure was put in place. And now we have ways of making things happen. And yet for me personally, although I was very relieved that was there, I suddenly felt very contained into an organisation suddenly, and I know the grass is always greener on the other side, but I was yearning for the freedom I'd felt in the first few days, and here we were in a new season of our organisation. How will we move forward from here? So I learned a lot of things about myself, about others, and how we operate. One of the things I was learning was that focus on purpose, and recalling and constantly reminding myself, why are we here, and are we moving towards what we said we would try and achieve, that was very clearly stated in the brochure at the beginning of the event. And I realised that, in common with a lot of organisations, half of the people who were in the room actually had no idea why we were there. And then people even towards the end of the week would say, we have no purpose, why are we here? And I'd be thinking, well, actually it was quite clearly written in the brochure, and we're constantly reminded of it, because the director would keep bringing us back to that point. And I can see how people struggle in organisations when there's complete disconnect with the purpose of a team or a unit or the entire organisation. And I found myself really plumbing the depths of a purpose statement like I've never done before. I started thinking, I need to memorise this, because it's quite an involved purpose statement in different clauses, and each one had different nuances to it. And I was really trying to digest and internalise this purpose statement in order to try and be effective in what I was contributing to this event. So one of the other areas that I took an interest in was the untapped resources, and there was a smaller group of us within the whole event that were looking at the idea of how connected to Source we are, and for me, Source is a connection to God, and for others in our group, it was other things, other ideas of how we centre ourselves and feel that connection that resources us, and I'd never seen it that way before, but the idea that when I spend time focusing on Source, for me, it equips me and resources me to be able to give. It's an untapped resource in many ways, and so we explored that as a group, and we set up a session in one of the mornings where people from many different backgrounds of faith or non-faith came together and looked at that together, and it definitely generated well, there was an incredible sense of love after that event, like there was after none of the other sessions, really. But it was a resource that we hadn't really identified previously, and one that had quite a profound, lingering effect through the whole day. So that was one area for me, and one that I will keep with me. Another area was where I felt that I learnt in was around the area of resistance, and there was a different group that was off working on that, but and they were exploring a hypothesis. What I discovered as we went through the week was sometimes ideas would get put out that I had an immediate barrier to inside me, and I felt resistance towards, and And sometimes that manifested in my face, or my words, or my reaction, and I wanted to push back on that. Or the other party immediately sensed that and withdrew their idea from putting it forward, and that in that situation I needed to then backtrack and reach out and try and recapture that idea. But what I discovered was that when I did that, and tried to explore and understand what was being suggested and why I felt resistance to it, we were able, more often than not, to come to a new place. We were able to create a new idea together that independently myself and the other party probably wouldn't have come up with. And there was opportunity for creative resources, another resource that was emerging out of resistance when you change your attitude and you're very intentional about that. And this is something that I have acted upon since coming back into my real world day job. So this is something I've acted upon since I've come back into my regular job, where I've tried to be very aware when I'm resistant to an idea that's come from somewhere else, and try to understand where my resistance comes from, and be very careful about my attitude, and see whether there is a way that I can create with the other party something new and constructive and helpful out of that, rather than just being a block and preventing either of us from really moving forward effectively. So creative use of resistance was another big area of learning for me. In particular, I noticed that there were some things that I was particularly resistant to at the beginning, which later on I came to appreciate in new ways, and appreciate other opportunities that existed as a result of that thing. So one of the things was a very strict adherence to what they call the time boundary. So when we got to the last minute and second of a session, it would end, and people would get up and leave. And initially, when that happened the first few times, that's kind of offensive, especially if you're the one who is in mid-flow at that point. And it was a source of a great deal of discussion from all of us participants who weren't familiar with that kind of way of operating. And yet, as we continued through the week, it came to be something that was quite valued and appreciated, at least by myself and several others as well. It meant that we were prioritising the break times as much as the session times, and it gave us quality break times where we actually were quite productive, and a lot of conversations were continuing in a dynamic way in these substantial regular breaks that we had throughout the day. I think we must have had about 6 half-hour breaks each day, which sounds very extravagant, but the sessions were an hour long in between. But they were very productive times. And in fact, in those first few days, it felt a little bit like maybe more work was happening outside the sessions than inside. But you shouldn't tell the director I said that, because that was beyond one of the boundaries that he specified. So one of the other things I discovered about myself was different ways I operate in different environments and contexts. And at one point in the event, there was something I had a personal mission to try and achieve, which was going to contribute to the overall purpose of the event. And I was feeling completely tied up in bureaucracy. I just thought, I don't think I can make this happen, and I started to behave in a bit of a covert, subversive way to get around the rules, to try and honour the principles that they were working by, but just in order to move things forward and be able to contribute this piece that myself and a few others were working on, and so it was a different way of working for me. And that was one of the nice things about the event, was it gave you that chance to explore different behaviours and ways of working. It's a safe environment because we're kind of isolated in this artificial kind of organisation we've created, to try out different things, to say, well, if I behave in this way, will it make a difference, or I can try that. and so it gives us that opportunity not just to try it ourselves, but to see other people as well and how they're working. And of course, after 7 days, we all left and went in different directions, so it didn't really matter. And that's what kind of added that sense of safety to how we could work and operate there. It was not the kind of event where people were going to stand up and teach you. And I think we realised that very early on. The learning was all around our ability to observe and process that with our fellow participants around. I learned a new expression of reflection in action. We're not pausing and having reflection sessions. We need to be observant and intentional about how we learn as we move forward, and that's also something that's been very helpful and useful to learn in that environment to bring back into the real world. Because I think we often get so caught up in things, and I speak for myself, so focused on the task that I don't often pause to reflect on the dynamics that are going on around me, the effectiveness of what myself and the wider team are doing, and reflect also back to the purpose of is what we're doing actually contributing to the purpose, or if we lost the plot somewhere. So the responsibility very much lay with us as participants to be able to reflect and process as we went along. It was not a taught course. And finally, I think the learning still goes on, and here we are, 5 months down the road, and still things come up at work, and I think this looks very familiar. And I reflect back to some incident or situation that I was in during the Passion, Purpose and Potency event, and I think, yeah, what are the things that I learned there that apply here and now in this situation? So it's not that it ends after 7 days, but a lot of that lives with you and continues on as you get back into the real world and have new resources to tap.